Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Fisher. Today we're going to talk about business succession planning. I'm very easygoing with this stuff. If you have questions that relate to anything, just feel free to jump in at any time. I think the allotted time is about an hour and 15 minutes. Depending on where we go and as we navigate through this with the group, there may be things that apply more. So happy to stop, get off tangent, get back on. I've got a little different options in there. So if you're an entrepreneur, what is the final act for your business? And when you think about that, it's really what do you want to happen, right? If you've been successful, do you want that business to go to the next generation? Do you want to continue in any capacity, pass it on to another employee, somebody else? Do you want to sell the business? What are the considerations? What are the different outcomes that can happen? And so what I'm going to talk through today is I'll give some real life examples of things that I've dealt with and also things that you might want to consider in your own business. And I'll get into myself a little bit too as well. When you do the decisions now, whether they're small, big, owners that I work with, it's just more, they know what they want to do, it's kind of intimidating because you hear different things from different places, different attorneys, different things that you need to do. So I'm going to try to simplify this world for you a little bit. It is a complicated process, but in theory it can be relatively simple if you think about it. So what we're going to talk through today is why do you need a succession plan? Where do you start? And what are some strategies, ideas around that to make that work for you? A little bit about myself. So I'm a certified financial planner. I specialize in working with small, closely held businesses. And in terms of my firm, I do probably somewhere between 100 and 200 business owner policies, key person policies, buy-sell policies, discussions a year. Working with business owners, retirement planning, wealth planning, all those different areas. But the core of it comes with having a plan here, and I'll talk through some decided examples of that. Married, 3 kids, 2 are out of the house. One's graduating here in the next year from Western Michigan, and I like to bass fish a lot, so that's my personal best there. Hoping to catch a bigger one this year. So these are some quick numbers, and this is really, I think, where the rubber meets the road, that 90% of businesses in the U.S. are controlled by a family, okay? Americanly owned, family controlled. 60% of them, 60% of executives fail with the first 18 months of being promoted. So the thought a lot of times is, well, hey, I've got my successor, this person's gonna take over. Well, that's a big number, like they don't succeed in that. Half of them collapse after the business owner dies. And that's a big number. And what we'll kind of focus on is not just that, but other things that could happen. And then less than 1/3 survive the transition from the first generation to the second in any capacity. So when you start with that, the question becomes, assuming you're all business owners and own that responsibility, what do you want to happen to your business? And having that plan. And what we typically find in clients that we work with is that you start a little bit too late, or you don't start at all, and things happen. So there are 3 possible outcomes to a business transition. The business owner dies or becomes disabled. This is a very, very common one. It continues doing a transfer to a key employee. The business is sold. Those are the 3. What you need to be aware of is what type of business, are there multiple owners, what does it look like in all those capacities, and to that degree, how do you value your business? What is the buyout structure and what are the tax implications? Now, I am not an attorney, I am not a tax accountant, so as I'm talking through these are all in nature to way to understand at a very general level, and because of that I think it can provide some value, because I'm not going to dive deep into how you design them, but what you need to do in general. So when you think about this, these are questions that you want to ask yourself. If you have partners, so if you have any business partners, do they have the ability about your spouse and family today? If something happened to them, how are you going to? You own all the relationships, you know all the people, and you got hit by a bus yesterday and you're not here today, what happens to your business? Does it just not exist? Do they say, listen, the other employee's like, I love the owner, but I don't really have any obligation to you. I'm going to work with somebody else. What is your business worth for someone to buy out from your family? or from yourself? So all important questions to ask. The other part, and this is one that I talk to business owners a lot of times we focus on, if I die, I want to know what's going to happen. But what if you're disabled? And I'll touch on this a little bit as well. You're more than likely to be disabled than to die before something happens. Again, these same questions are going to come up to that. If you're disabled, what do you do? So if you have the inability to go into work every day, what happens? You still own the business. Who's going to run your business? What's the plan? Do you have any protection against that? And we'll talk with different ways to approach this at different levels. When you retire, you're going to see these same questions, right? So can they buy your family? Can your children as a spouse, can they take over? Could they still run it without you? Is it still profitable, right? Will it still work the same way? Now, I run my own business within a business. You guys run your own businesses, right? So obviously you're not going to feel that it can run the same way it does without you, right? You feel you're valuable to some degree, at least hopefully you do, right, to some capacity. And how do you figure all these things out? I want to get started with the buy-sell agreement, but I want to tell a quick story first. So real-life scenario, a client of mine, so a family-owned business. A husband and wife own this business. They've owned it for 25 years. And it's about 15, 20 employees, so not a large business, but the annual revenue of the business is about $3 to $4 million. They have a cousin who was working with the business that was going to plan to take over the business when they retire. They put together an agreement of how that would happen, what they would do, and they also chose a way that they could fund that, and they put a life insurance policy together for the husband who was the main owner. So the husband and wife owned this business together. 6 months before the set retirement and buyout date, the owner, who was healthy as a horse, they found a massive brain tumor and he died within 2 months. Now, there was a buyout plan, there was an agreement, and there was insurance, and it all happened very easily. And the wife, who did run the business with him, was able to stay on, transition the business, and the buyout ability from the life insurance was able to pay for it. So there's no big financial hurdle. The business continued without a glitch. Now, the second part of the story is the next owner, who I worked with as well, him and his wife took over ownership of the business. So now figure someone that's in their 60s and 70s, now there's somebody in their 40s and 50s that takes over. He already had a policy. They already had an agreement of kind of what they wanted to do. His wife didn't have one. And we talked about, you should probably get one, maybe you should look at one. He's like, I know, I'll get to it. My wife's really healthy. If anything happens, it's going to be me. The wife, possible, she was a runner every day, healthiest person you ever met. 6 months later, she gets diagnosed with a rare form of lung cancer, dies 4 months after that. So the key with all of this is there was a plan in place with all of it. And if that husband hadn't made that decision when he did, there wouldn't have been any insurance. She ran the business. He brought in the business, but she ran it, right? So these things continue to do this while he lost his wife. And today, his wife's not there. It's been about 3 or 4 years, but at the end of the day, it's okay. So the key to this, and that's where you want to start, is this buy-sell agreement. When you think of a buy-sell agreement, don't think of this big, huge, complicated thing. Ultimately, what do you want to happen if something happens to you? Who do you want to buy it? And who do you want to sell it to? If you have two business partners, if you look at it this way, if you each own a business 50-50, if one of them dies, the agreement would just say, hey, I agree to buy out your portion, and your family's going to agree to sell it to me, and it's in a formal agreement. Now, the best way to do it is a legal document, working with an attorney to set up and structure it the right way. There are other things tied to buy-sell agreement I'll get a little bit later that you need to think about. But have something in writing, because if you don't, and I've ran into situations where you don't, and I have a client that was on the backside of that. She was the spouse of her husband that passed away, who had to fight with the other partner to get her share of the business because he did not want to give it to her. So these things have happened. Information you're going to want. What is the value of your business? So I get this question a lot when I talk to business owners. I say, what do you think your business is worth? They're like, I don't know. I don't know what the right number is. There are simple ways to get simple business valuations, and then there are official business valuations. What's not updated on this slide is there was There was a ruling over the last year talking about business valuation, so I think it's a big part of when you're looking at a buy-sell agreement, but they're easy to get. But when you think of your business value, it's typically a multiple of revenue or a multiple of net income in most cases. Get an idea, you can do some general research, find out enough about it, and then have your plan of why you want to transfer ownership. So if you know now who you might want to transfer ownership to, have that conversation with that person, draw up some agreement, even as informal it is, so you know what's going to happen. And then the other question is, well, how's this all going to be paid for? So if you say, hey, all right, we're partners, we own a business together, the business is worth $1 million, we're each going to have $500,000 a portion. If something happens to me, you're going to buy it out. Okay, well, how am I going to buy you out? Is it going to be paid off over a period of time? Is it going to be paid off in a lump sum? Am I going to have to get a loan? You typically want to understand how that might happen. So if you have an employee that's going to be the person, how are they going to buy it out from you? And I'll talk through a couple ways to look at that there. Do you want to do it with life insurance? Do you want to gift it? Is there family involved? Do you want to give it to your children? What are efficient ways to do that? So all these other things to think about. When you look at business value, define the purchase price, have a business valuation done. It's very important that you have some type of agreed or stated value. Now that doesn't mean necessarily a dollar amount, right? But what it might mean is, what are we going to base the valuation of the business on? It could be as simple as a multiple of revenue, or we will get an outside business valuation done based off of this date, or it's a set dollar amount. Set dollar amounts are difficult now because if you're saying my business is worth $2 million, 20 later on, it kind of not going to work, and there's going to be tax implications there that I can't really get into too much, but just have something, right? Multiple of revenue, outside person's going to put a value on it. Maybe you need to get an appraisal, formula driven, I mentioned there, or a set price, and the other part is really a particular way that you can fund it in general. Any questions? I'm going to, yes?
How does life insurance fit into this picture? Is it personal life insurance or insurance for people?
That's a good question. I'm going to get into it later, but ultimately, businesses can own policies. Or if you're business owners, you own policies on each other. And that's for tax purposes, so I'll talk through that in a second. But yeah, it's later. Because one second. One thing I want to focus on is that life insurance is one way to do it. There are other ways. Obviously, that's something that I work on, but that is one way to look at it. Yes?
For values, what's the typical range of multiples for either revenue or net income?
It depends on the business. So, it ranges anywhere from 2 to 7 times is typical, but if you look at
2 to 7 times net income.
Net income is typically going to be a higher multiple. Revenue will typically be a lower one, historically. But yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so your net income was the 2 to 7, right? So it couldn't be 2 to 7 times revenue.
It could be as well. So to look at it this way, when you get into valuations, and I'm not an expert on valuations, but I've been involved in the conversations, I've talked to people, there's an essence of what's called goodwill. And goodwill is just you, right, to some degree. So if you have a business that's all driven by you and you only, right, like if you're a single individual contractor, right? Yeah, no, but in general, I'm saying, so that's where it's relative to where if you have an established business, right, with revenue driving, where you have a key person business there, that multiple could be 5 or 6 or 7. And the business type really matters on that. And there's informal ways to do this. There's inexpensive ways to do it just to get an idea, which I work with a lot. I'll talk through that in a second. Any other question? So when you talk about business value, good question. This is tied from the Internal Revenue Code. Again, I'm not a tax person, but you have to have a bona fide business arrangement negotiated at arm's length, which means you just have to have something agreed to in some capacity. It can't be a device to merely transfer something to a family member, which means you can't say, hey, I agree to sell it to you for $1 and you'll buy it to me for $1, business is worth $20 million. It's not going to work that way. And there was a ruling just this past year in 2024 tied to this, where valuation is a much bigger part when you look at something for a buy-sell agreement. So having one put together that's structured well with an attorney makes sense. Must be an option to buy and a binding obligation to sell. So obviously you can't just Maybe you can buy it, maybe you could sell, but you can give right of first refusal. There's other things wording that you could put in there. The price, again, fixed formula or method. And you must prohibit the owner from selling without doing anything else. So ultimately, if you have two business partners, it says, hey, I'm going to buy the business from you if you die, you're going to buy it from me if I die, and your family's going to sell it to me, and we've already agreed upon that. And the value is set. It makes the ability of the other person to contest that more difficult. Doesn't mean they won't. But typically, if you have all the parties involved, when I talk to most business owners, do you want your spouse involved with the business or do you want to work with the other spouse? A lot of times it's not really. The other spouse doesn't know the business. I do. So when you start to have that conversation, it's like, well, you probably want to have something that says, hey, husband or wife, we looked at this. This is what we agreed to, and we know. Because everything's fine until something happens. And when you're talking about money. So when you're talking about a business and evaluation, because people don't know. So, I mean, people may think a business is worth $20 million when it's worth $5 million. But they don't know. But if you don't have an agreement and a set way to do it, it can all be questioned, right? And then all it takes somebody to say, well, I really think you should get an attorney involved and take a look at this because this doesn't sound right. So you want to make sure that you have it documented in a specific way to protect yourself when you're gone. And this here is, it's a busy slide. I don't like slides that show like 18 things because it's hard to take a look at. But if you can focus on it, when you look at family gifting, there are different ways to do it. And this gets into kind of planning of gifting strategies, what are called grant or retained annuity trusts, inherited, trying to figure out the best way to do it. Non-family, a little bit more straight lined, and this will get into a little bit of what your question was, ma'am. So the selling to a co-owner, there's cross purchase, entity purchase, multi-owner, all these different words. Wait and see is just, hey, we're good, we'll figure it out, which is obviously what we're not here to talk about today, but that is one way to do it, just not do anything. The cross-purchase, entity purchase I'll talk through, which is really ultimately cross-purchase as you say, hey, we're going to handle this with each other. Selling to a third party, selling to an employee, just having something structured set up to do that. When you talk about funding it, and so life insurance is one way to do it, which you asked about. Do you want to do it as loans? And here's kind of the positive negatives. So installments, the pros to the person that's still owning the business, you could pay it out over time. The cons are really that you have to rely on the business revenue and profitability for that to happen. If the business goes bankrupt and fails, you don't get anything. That note could still be owed, but if you don't have any revenue. The client I mentioned earlier of mine, her husband passed away 4 years ago. It's a 10-year buyout of $384,000 a year. And she's got 7 more years left. The business is still very profitable, but if something happens, she does not get them. I mean, she can't, if the business doesn't, she can't get it. So while she is protected, she still has to rely on that business to do it. Plus, that business has that expense on the books to buy out that portion, and it's a lot of money. So that's the pros and cons of installments. On a loan, the pros, again, to the person that's doing it, you get an immediate payout. The cons, interest, loan debt, profitability. Saving, you can pay it out of cash reserves. The cons of that is you typically, if your business is worth a lot of money, that's a lot of money you got to put over here just in case something happens. It's kind of like a sinking fund. Gifting, you can transfer the business at a discount. The cons are, to that slide in the beginning, can they keep it profitable? Right? And you saw the statistics. Right? So they have to have the ability to do that. If you're not there to run your business and your son or daughter is there to run the business, can they run it the same way you do? Will there be a learning curve? Will there be a loss of revenue? Will there be a loss of contracts? A loss of anything in the interim? And how do you want to protect against that? So, life insurance disability kind of falls in the median. It's very efficient in terms of it's going to get you an immediate payout. It's going to be very tax efficient. Obviously, the cons are there's an expense to insurance and getting underwritten for insurance, right, to that level. But this is typically, in the business owners I work with, 90% are doing something like this. Because it's you're leveraging against life insurance. It's a very tax efficient way to do it. When you look at a buy-sell agreement itself, you want to identify triggering events and update as needed, which means What you did 5 or 10 years ago may not exist today. Your business may have tripled. You may have multiple owners. You may have 100 employees where you used to have 10. What is the funding plan for it? Meaning if you have a any changes, just keep up to date. So typically, if you have a buy-sell agreement right now, it's recommended you review it every 3 to 5 years, depending on your business model and how much it's changed. And if you don't have a buy-sell agreement, sometimes it's part of your operating agreement, and sometimes it's informal as well. Now, informal is not as legally protected, but the point is, what happens is, the way we're a lot of business owners, I know I got to meet with the attorney. I know I got to do that. I've been meaning to do this. I've been meaning to do that. And then they just don't get around to it. Just write something down and talk to the other person and talk to your partner and have it even just on a sheet of paper where you both signed and dated it. It's not a legal document to some degree. But when you talk to the spouse, it's like, hey, this is what we said we were going to do. And the spouse may say, okay, that's fine. But just have something, have a discussion about it, talk about it. Because after somebody's gone and when somebody's dead and there's nobody there in the room, it just lends to a million other people's opinions on how they think it should be handled in general. So I was talking about the buy-sell is really from an owner perspective. One of the other parts, and this is something we deal a lot with, is just a key person, a key employee of your company. Somebody that if they don't show up tomorrow morning, what happens? What happens to your business? What happens to your revenue? Are they replaceable? Now, the logic if you own a business is you're going to never, like everybody's replaceable, but there are people in your mind that really aren't replaceable, that if you lost them, it would be really devastating to your business. Now, it doesn't mean your business would fall apart. You may have to go in and work more or start doing what you used to do. It says, hey, if that person dies, there's insurance there to protect it. So to that level, on a key person, the business owns the policy, the key person is the insured, the business is the beneficiary. The cost is the premium, but the death benefit is paid out tax-free to the business, right? And so how you can really attribute what a key person insurance is, what you account for loss of revenue, and really the time to hire, retain, get a new employee to fix that, and maybe what relationships they have. Typically, when you're looking at a value of a key person, it's tied to the revenue you think you might lose. A rule of thumb is normally 10 times income. It doesn't have to be that, but it's different levels. This gets into the cost, again, of losing a key person. Some are tangible, some are intangible. Contractual benefits due to employee contracts, management, staff disruption, disruption of revenue, loss of the skill and expertise is a big one. Maybe loss of reputation, loss of recruiting power, right? Depending on the business you have, and if they run the crew or they do this daily or they run the office, you bring somebody else in there. Well, if that person's a jerk, people leave. And that's the biggest thing. Like you bring in somebody else that you think can do that, and it's not a match. All of a sudden, you've lost your key person, and you've lost 2 or 3 employees. They're like, what? It's not the same without this person being there anymore. So it's important. Finding the replacement, the time frame, meeting obligations, maintaining your business relationships, and protecting them. So all of this is going together. So if you have a key person in your company, it may make sense to protect them. Now, a question I get from the key people, right? So this is something to consider. So when we would do, like, let's say, a key person policy for someone, they'd say, so let me get this straight. I'm going to do a life insurance application. I'm going to get underwritten, and if I die, the business is going to get $1 million. And I don't get anything. They're like, that kind of stinks. So what sometimes business owners will do is say, listen, and this is in that example where the owner's wife passed away, he does have a key person in his company that we got insurance for, but what we agreed to do with him is that there's a $750,000 policy for the company and a $250,000 policy he bought for his family. And there's no rules around it. The structure, again, the business owns the policy, key person is the insured, the business is the owner. For the separate policy for that key person, they're going to own the policy. You're just going to bonus them out the premium in terms of an income because you want them to own that policy on their own for tax efficiency. So there's a million different ways to do it. So when you think of how you want to navigate, just think what you want to protect, and then ultimately there's ways to work around it. How a key person policy would work, again, the employer owns it.
Hey, John.
Yep. Oh, sorry, yes.
I have a quick question about a key person.
Yeah.
I would assume this is a discussion with that key key person before you take life insurance on them?
Yeah, so the other element of it is, and that was probably going to come up here, and I might be one of these next slides, but no, to that level, right, if, and I have this example, okay, like, so there is a key person, and he's a little short for his weight, the best way to say it. He's not insurable, he has health issues, right? We already kind of know that with him. We can't get him key person insurance, right? So there is that element of the, like, you have to be insurable to do it. There are other policies where you don't have to be as insurable. So there are different avenues to do that. But in most cases, yeah, you want to kind of know. But yeah, it is more kind of determining, like with most business owners, it's, hey, I want to protect this key person. And then it's like, well, all I really need is, how old are they? And then we can figure out the amount. And then it's more of like, how do I have that conversation? And that's where it gets into why you're doing it. And that's where sometimes it's like, we'll probably get you some insurance too, just because it feels more one-sided than anything else. But yeah, to that point, you have to be insurable to do that. So the employer is going to own it. They pay the insurance premiums to the insurance company. Death benefit comes back to the employer. The business owns a policy, key person insured. This is very, very important. When you think of any business-owned life insurance policy, what we call it is we call it the unholy trinity. What that means is you should never really have more than two parties do a life insurance contract. So if the business owns it, right, if I'm the business and I own it on my key person, the interest I have is that person is key to my company, so I should get the death benefit. I've had businesses that said, I'm going to own a policy, and the business, I'm going to give half to myself and then half to the spouse. But the business is trying to look out. They're like, I'll just make 50-50. The business will get half, I'll get half. Well, the business has no relationship with the spouse. So if the money flows into the business as a death benefit, and the business distributes that money out to the spouse, what is that event? It's taxable. It's a distribution. In most cases, there are exceptions to that, partnerships, different things. There's other ways to do it, so I don't want to get too far into the weeds of how to structure policies. But in general, you want the business to own it and be the beneficiary, and then you can have different ways that you can get the money out to people. It's a common mistake. I review policies all the time. They've got like 5 beneficiaries on them sometimes. You just think more than 2, probably a tax issue.
Another question.
Yes.
Can the key person be yourself?
Yes. Great question. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the key person can be yourself.
You can take a life insurance quote-unquote policy on yourself as the owner.
Yep.
And have the company
Yep.
pay for that life insurance.
Yes, and so when you think of it from a life insurance perspective, it's insurable interest. The insurance company underwrites 2 things. The person has their health, their age, but why is they getting the policy? I'm key to the company. I run it. If I'm not there, business is going to be hurt, right? So as long as there's justifiable way to prove that, which is easy in general. Now, the other element of it is what if you don't die, but what if you're disabled? And this is more common. Now, I will say key person like life insurance is less expensive. So it's it's very, very common. Key person disability, it is a little bit, it's just more expensive because you're more than likely to get disabled than to die. But if you think about that, if something happens and somebody's permanently disabled, can't come to work anymore, it's the same as if they are not there anymore. They can't come in, they can't come to work, right? So you're still affected the same way. So key person disability works where the business would own a policy, keep it same strategy. And typically what this is called in our world is called business overhead insurance. So when you tie and you say, hey, you have a business cost that you need to protect for a period of time, and you normally have a waiting period. Because when somebody's disabled, you don't know for a while if they're going to be able to come back to work or not. It might be 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, you can determine it. But once you know they're not coming back, you could typically pay business overhead for a period of 12 to 24 months. And that amount might be $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a month, depending. Now, all of that has to be kind of, what are your expenses and what are you doing there? But always something to consider. So those are the different ways to look at it. Now, the other thing that's not on this slide, I'm going to go back for a second, is if you're a business owner, there is what is called disability buyout coverage. Again, when you think disability, just think a lot more to protect, so just a lot more expensive. So I've done disability buyout policies. Disability buyout says that, let's say you've got two owners. They own a company 50-50. The company's worth $1 million. It's a similar scenario. And that person becomes permanently disabled. Cannot work at all. But they're still alive. They own the business, but they can't contribute anything to the business. And you're kind of trying to figure out, like, what do you do? It's your business partner. You guys have built the business together. He or she has done everything they're supposed to do. And bad luck, something happened, some type of accident, and now they're not able to come to work anymore. But you don't, they're getting half of everything. So what disability buyout coverage says is, if something is happened like that, it's typically like a 12-month waiting period. There's a lump sum buyout that would go to the person that's disabled, and then it would normally pay them an additional amount for a period of 12 to 24 months. So that's the way disability buyout works. So that's another logic or a policy or way to kind of look at it and kind of navigate it. So a lot of different ways to do it. The key thing for everybody in this room, and obviously I handle the insurance end of things, but ultimately, what do you want to happen? We're all like, if you all run a business, what do you do every day? What do you do when you get up in the morning? You think about your business. What do you do before you go to bed? You think about your business. What do you do when you're on vacation? You think about your business, like all the time. It's what we love, it's what we do, but it does consume us, right? And so to that level, we don't take time enough to kind of think about what happens when we're not here. I'm 51, so depending on the age of everybody in the room, I'm relatively young or old. But for me, am I going to transition my business? I've hired a young advisor. He's been with me a couple years, and you're going to see if he's maybe somebody that can allow me to do that. Because if something happened to me, what's going to happen to my business? You care about your clients. You care about what you do. You've got employees that work hard for you. They depend on you. So it's really, really, really important. And it is something you probably never think is going to happen, right? And I've had it happen more times than I would like to say here, but just think about it to that level. And when you're talking about different ways to structure it to get to your question, so let's say you have two business owners, 50-50 in a company, and you want to structure it a way that, like, hey, if something happens to me, I want to buy out your portion. If something happens, you want to buy out your portion. So again, using like $1 million example. So if your shares are worth $500,000, theirs is worth $500,000. In that type of option, it's called where you would own policies on each other. So if me and you were the business owner, well, I'll get there. So me and you are business owners, all right? We have a buy-sell agreement that says if something happens, we're going to buy each other out. We've got these life insurance policies. You own a policy on me. So you're the owner, I'm the insured, you're the beneficiary. Two people to the contract, that's it. I own a policy on you, I'm the owner, you're the insured, I'm the beneficiary. If something happens, I get $500,000, I get tax-free, and then I buy out your share from the business. Two things happen. Number one, I've been able to buy out the share from the life insurance. Number two, I get a step up in basis of what I just paid for the business. That's a cross-owned policy. Now, the way that you pay for the policies, and again, I'm not an accountant or anything like that, but very simply, normally that money is, depending on the type of corporation you are, it can be sometimes paid by an S corp, but ultimately, you bonus yourself out the money to pay, right? Because the key is you want it to be, it's all about taxes, right? So if you get this benefit to pay for this policy from the business as income, you'll pay tax on the income of that. That makes the death benefit tax-free. If the business was to pay the policy for you, it's debatable. It's like, well, if the business paid, I understand you own the business, but the business is its own entity. So very important. Now, once you get beyond two owners, if you have 3 owners, 4 owners, 5 owners, then you're going to have what's called entity owned. The business will own it. The business will own it. There will be shares that'll be distributed out and done within the company to make sure. So like when you have like 3 owners, because that's where it gets funky, right? You've got, let's say the business is worth $900,000, 300, 300, 300. Well, you got 2 owners that are still around. Well, you have to even out the other 2 to make it 50-50. So the business owns the policy, $300,000 comes in, They give 150 to each. Now you both own at 450 and you're even. And you keep that structure going. And so most, when you look at, let's say, like a buy-sell policy or key person policy or any of that stuff, 95% of what we do is term insurance. It's inexpensive. It allows flexibility. You get it for a period of time, all that other stuff, but those are things to consider. In terms of a business valuation as well, a lot of the insurance companies that we work with offer kind of like a free informal valuation. 3 years tax returns, 3 years balance sheets, and they can get out a number. And to the question earlier, they also research the type of company and give you an idea of the multiple expect. And they give you 4 different types of valuation types. And it's pretty efficient. So normally, like a lot of times companies I need to know what my business is worth first. So to give you an example, 3 business owners, their business was worth 60 million, at least they thought it was, but they wanted to get a better idea of what it was. So we got 3 years of balance sheet, 3 years of income statement. The business was 82 million, based off this informal valuation. So we looked at it, we restructured the policies, reset up the insurance to do that. And the insurance company was good with it, right? So we didn't need to do this big formal valuation to do that. Now I recommend if you're getting to those dollars, and they're gonna have one done, and then they updated their agreement to do all that. So there's a lot of different things to do. The point is just have a plan. More than anything else, just have a plan, have an idea, know what you wanna do. It's very, very important. Other things that aren't on here, but to go back for a second, I just wanna make sure time-wise, I'm almost at, I talk too much. Am I at time? No, we've got time, right? Where am I at time-wise? Not that I want to keep everybody here that long, I'm just saying. We're good, okay. So one of the, one of the other things that you can look to do is there are options called employee stock option plans to sell out of the business. So there are things you can do within your retirement plans as well. I do a lot of planning there. So if it's more like saying, hey, I just want to try to transfer the business while I'm alive and figure out a way to do that, there are ways to set that up. There are ways to do it with other types of retirement plans, 401k plans, profit sharing, cash balance plans, a lot of different ways to look at it to kind of get money out of the business into yourself in different ways. So the theme of it for you guys is just if you already have one, oh, yes. Oh, if you already have a plan and you haven't looked at it in a while, look at it. If you don't have a plan, just think of what you want in your head and just write it down on a sheet of paper and then try to formalize it in some way. And just don't wait. Because normally, like I have clients, I have one, we are 2.5 years and he keeps meaning to get to it. And it's needed, right? And so I had another client that waited a year. And one of the owners, and this company is worth about 20 million. The other, so $10 million policies each. The one owner, we got the blood test back, something was off on the blood test, stage 1 prostate cancer, completely curable, completely fine, right? We found it on the blood test, but he's not insurable for 3 years, right? So we got policy on one, but not on the other. Nothing happened, right? We're getting the new policy now 3 years later, but you just don't know what's going to happen is my point with any of that stuff. Yes, sorry.
So being at a DBE conference, have you seen valuation of companies? Because you can value a company with you there, but you have a DBE takedown of your value of your company, knowing that if you can only sell to a DBE to keep the DBE, then, or a small business, and then it becomes a large business.
Well, yeah, so it wouldn't be documented on paper that would matter, but yes, it would be something to consider. But when you look at business size and revenue, that multiple does go down, like in general. So kind of depending on what it is. But yes, as a business owner, I would account for it, right, for sure. Yeah, because it's just, and it's a transferability to business. And, a dentist is a good example. Like you have to transfer to another dentist. It's harder to do. Right, and that's not tied to maybe specific contracts and things that you need to have that business. But when you look at that case, especially when you look at business transition, who would you transfer your business to? I don't, and then I'm not asking you on the spot. I'm just saying, like in general, like those are things to think about. because those things may matter. And if you don't have that plan, right, and those things become in jeopardy, then what are you going to do to do that stuff? So very, very good question. Yes, ma'am.
Just as a follow-up to hers, as DBE firms, right? Especially if you are a single owner. How do you, in the case of death or disability?
Yep.
Is there any instruments, right, to still be able to maintain your business like a trust? Can the ownership be in a trust?
It can. It can, but when trust is more creditor protection and kind of the way that you want to pass it up for some estate planning. There's different kinds, revocable, irrevocable. But when you think of owning a business 100%, I would look at it. So let's say for me personally, right? So my business, ultimately, if I die, the value of what my business is, I want to go to my wife and my 3 kids. So to that level, with a business owner, when they own the business 100%, you want to normally protect the business with key person, but you want to protect yourself. And to simplify it, it's normally just an individual policy, right? Because I want to have control. So I have 2 policies. I have a personal policy, but I have a personal policy that's really tied to my business. And so that policy is going to last till the time I think I want to retire. The other one's going to last longer. Because ultimately, I want my business revenue and what my business is worth to be just my wife and kids are going to get money. The business will still exist, right? And it'll still go on. So what level we'll kind of see, and there's an agreement there. But ultimately, it's kind of both. But I'd rather just have my wife and kids get the money first, whatever happens with the business later. And because ultimately, if you don't have money to pay for the business and there's nothing to pay the employees do what? They leave. Right, so whether it's disability, right, the ability to pay the employees, whether it's insurance to keep everybody on the books and keep paying them, whatever you choose to do, the business can kind of survive a little bit until it can get its legs. But when you own 100%, always have, because business owners will call me and they'll say, hey, I want to get like a key person buy-sell policy on myself, right? And I said, well, own one individually. It's very clean, right? You own it, your family's a beneficiary, it's outside of the business. If your family wants to put money back into the business, it's their prerogative. Yes?
I didn't know you were finishing.
It's your prerogative, but ultimately the money isn't stuck in the business, right? It's with your family. They may choose to shut the business down, right? But if they've got $1 million there, or whatever the business value is, and they're doing that, at least they're going to have something capacity to keep going. Yes?
So the first thing I did when I purchased my business was get $1 million whole life policy.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
So
I'm just
the
gonna
way
shut
it's
this 'cause it's
structured right now is I just purchased my building, and then I paid off the goodwill and everything.
Right.
So of that $1 million, half of that's going to go to the bank to pay off the building.
Yes.
Tomorrow, and then the other $500,000 my wife would get.
Right.
If I were to get key person, let's say I got $1 million policy.
Yep.
Goes in the business. Could I structure it in such a way that the money goes into the business, each of my 3 employees get $50,000, for example, all the current bills are paid, and then the rest she gets as well?
Well, in terms of, so you can have an operating agreement that states whatever you want to happen, right? But any distribution they get could be deemed taxable, but that's fine. But either way, that's but to that level, as long as you have an agreement that says what's going to happen, it can happen. The question is the tax ramifications of what you do, but yeah, for sure.
I kind of like that because I don't like that, like I said, half of that policy for my wife, she doesn't get anymore because she has to pay off the mortgage and the goodwill and everything.
Yeah, and so when you think about it, really think straightforward of what you want to happen, but then just work with somebody that knows how it needs to happen. Is the conversation. The $60 million one quick. Are we till 5:45? But I'm not going to keep. We're not going to go that long. But I will stay for as long questions you have. But to give you an example of just making sure that you're working with someone that knows what they're doing, that $60 million example I gave you. 3 business owners, 7 entities. They all owe different percentages. The agent they were working with them was going to write 24 separate life policies. And so they were like, that just kind of sounds weird. And then they told me their whole situation, and I said I could do it in 3. And they're like, how? And it was just a matter of how you would structure it, and it gets into partnerships and things that you do. But ultimately, they could not understand the difference. But the insurance agent they were working just didn't understand it to that level. So it's very important the way that you structure policy and think through it and understand the tax portion. And a lot of the insurance companies that we work with and that we do with have resources, attorneys, accountants, just to kind of, run things off up to any degree. Any other questions? Anything I missed? Anything going to be clear? Yes?
I know you mentioned term life.
Yeah.
Are these policies term life or whole life?
They can be whatever you want.
You don't know when you're gonna die. This is associated with a business,
Correct.
so basically heading to.
Most businesses, a lot of times it's term insurance for this reason. The value of your business fluctuates, right? Up and down. And everything is fluid. So when you think of a term policy, it's pay as you go. It's not you don't have to continue to pay. You could stop whenever you want and it just goes away. So it provides a lot of flexibility. And that's what really business owners need. If you have an established business with an established value, or you know exactly what you're going to do and you know what that's going to be, the value of having a permanent policy, like a whole life policy, is there because it does accumulate cash value. But when you think of a permanent policy, and the analogy I'll use is this: it's like when you see the space shuttle take off. They count down to 0, and what do you see happen? Smoke, 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 and it's like it's not going anywhere. That's what a permanent life insurance policy is. It's a lot of fuel to try to get it going. And then it starts going faster and faster, and then it's outside the Earth's atmosphere, and it's going like 1,000,000 miles an hour. A permanent life insurance policy, and the key with a permanent policy is that you have to have enough fuel, money, to get it out of the atmosphere so it's running on its own, and it takes time. So the key with a permanent policy is really, I tell most business owners, it's a 15-year commitment to get it where it needs to be in most cases. And what I find a lot, I'll review a lot of permanent policies, and to the analogy I'll give you, it's a space shuttle. If the policy was a space shuttle, they put about enough fuel in it to get it maybe over the coast of Florida, and then it's going to crash and burn. So it's just more about having the policies designed properly on the permanent side. So I love permanent insurance. You just got to design it properly, and you got to really know from a cash flow perspective that you're willing to commit to it for a period of time. 10, 15 years is, and it doesn't mean you have to, but I really like to do it that way. That's why when you're talking about a business owner, cash flow is an issue for any business, right? And when you're contract driven or business driven, you may have a good year or a bad year, depending on what happens. So a lower cost insurance policy is typically more effective, because I know we're talking about situations where people died, but the odds are hopefully you don't. And that term insurance will be there. Statistically, about 2% of term insurance policies pay out. Now, I think that's higher on the business end, for sure, for whatever reason. But did you have a question? No? Okay. Any other questions? Anything else? Yes?
Quick question. Succession planning. Let's say I'm the business owner and I want to have all the employees own the business.
Yes.
That employee stock ownership program.
Yep.
How does succession planning, key man life insurance, how does that work into that kind of structure?
Yeah, good question. So the employee stock option plan and ESOP, as they're called, is where basically you're going to fund company stock, whether it's private or public stock, into a retirement plan that's going to go to employees, but you're funding it over time. So again, the situation is that if that's your plan, what happens if you die? So again, life insurance is behind it typically because you want to protect the obligation of what that ESOP or the employee stock option plan exists for. So most of the times when you have an ESOP, you don't have to have life insurance behind it, but you still have that obligation, right? Because you're saying you're going to sell the business to the employees, but if you don't fund it in time, it goes back to what I was saying before. How do you want to fund your risk? You can fund it out of company payroll. You can fund it out of a cash fund, or a lot of different ways. Just whatever you feel is the most comfortable. To that level. And to go back, I know we've talked about insurance and all this. I'm a certified financial planner. There's options on everything. So no answer is absolute, right? Because people ask me, do I need life insurance? I don't know. I don't know what you need, but the plea is you need what you need. Meaning, right, you're going to protect what you want to protect. That's the important part. Do we have enough coverage? I don't know. Do we need coverage? I don't know, because what do you want to happen if you don't show up that next morning or that person doesn't show up? How do you want to protect it? And then you determine what you want to do from there. And that's the important part. Insurance, protect, and buy, sell, all that stuff, you just got to make sure it's coming from the right place, and you need to own the responsibility. don't let anybody tell you you should have to this or you have to do that. Listen to the options, get the positive negatives, make that educated decision, and go from there. So thanks, appreciate it.